I know you're working because you got like folders and folders, folders of papers, papers and papers. So you're doing some things. Let's talk about some of the cases that you're working on, and then I have some questions about people who do work like you, people in the civil rights thing, and what we should expect from them, folk that represent us. So you're working on two. You have two major cases that don't have national attention, which is interesting, but they should. Tell us about Maurice Gordon.
Certainly, I will say that last year when we first filed, we did get some traction. I think that unfortunately for the Gordon family and his legacy, there were so many cases for people to follow last year and so many instances of police sanctioned murder that not all of them gets the attention that it deserves. But coincidentally, Maurice was 2 days before George Floyd. He was traveling on the Garden State Parkway and he was stopped. They accused him of speeding and the situation escalated and he ended up being shot 6 times. He was unarmed. The state trooper knew that he was unarmed. You hear the recording that he patted him down. He invited him to sit in the back of his trooper car and had him sitting there for almost 20 to 30 minutes. So I think we all can understand as people of color, sitting in the back of a police car for 20 to 30 minutes without any clear direction about what's happening. You're supposedly waiting for a tow truck. I'm not being told that I'm under arrest. At a certain point, you get uncomfortable and you want to leave. And that was when things escalated when he tried to leave.
Let's pause there for a second, William Wagstaff III. Um, I ran out of gas in Florida and I had to walk a mile or two to the gas station. And a police officer saw me and he took me to dropped me off on my way there. He told me I had to sit in the back because they're not allowed to have people sit in the front, even though, you know. And I got in the back of that car with no handles. It was tight. I'm 5'10". I'm 5'10". I'm not the tallest person in the world, but my knees were literally in my chest in the back. And I'm like, how, this is an uncomfortable ride. So when you said 30 minutes in the back with your knees in your chest, the claustrophobia, because it's tight back there, and then there are no handles. Yeah, I can imagine being agitated.
Right.
And it's a traffic violation. In New Jersey, let me just tell you, New Jersey Turnpike, New Jersey, period, notorious. I think about Asada Shakur. I think about the black men that were killed on the New Jersey Turnpike that changed the law in New Jersey around these types of
Racial profiling.
stops, racial
Correct.
profiling, right? So that Maurice Gordon stopped, traffic violation, no weapon, sitting in the back of a police vehicle for what reason? And then he gets shot 6 times. Please, what was the reasoning?
The officer, as they are often trained to say, claims that he shot him 6 times because he was reaching for his gun. The video that captured it shows no evidence that he was reaching for his gun. By all history, from people that know him closely, people that had interactions with him in school, the most calm, laid back, so nobody's buying that narrative. And even the way that he panicked after he shot him, for me, it was clear he recognized that he did something wrong. The question is whether or not he is going to be held to task. We have the civil rights case going, and then under New Jersey statute, they have to send the case to the grand jury, and we're still waiting for that case to be presented to see if he'll be charged, the officer that is.
Okay. In the civil rights case, which you're representing the family.
Representing his estate and his mom and his dad.
Okay, his mom and his dad. And we're talking about Maurice Gordon, Jersey native, Jersey resident.
He was actually from Jamaica. He had immigrated here when he was 19, about 6 or 7 years ago, to be with his family, and they lived in Poughkeepsie, New York.
Okay.
So he was not a Jersey native. He had been working
So he
for
just happened to be on the Jersey Turnpike.
He was on the Garden State Parkway.
Gardens. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. He just happened to be on the Garden State Parkway.
So has there been any kind of settlement, or does that come after the? Because I'm always curious about these cases, like all of these families get these settlements. Whether we're talking about Eric Garner or George Floyd, the family gets settlements, and like the George Floyd family got a settlement before Chauvin was actually convicted, which I thought was interesting. How does that work, William?
I think in the George Floyd case, it was something that was so egregious that they didn't have to wait for there to be a verdict in the criminal case. And I think that from a political standpoint, which we can't underestimate how much politics plays into settlements and plays into verdicts, that they would have been excoriated if they tried to drag his family through years and years of litigation. So I don't think they really had a choice but to settle that as quickly as possible. Under normal circumstances, the families get a settlement after usually years and years of fighting. And what it does for the family is it keeps the wound open. If you're constantly having to get updates from an attorney about motions being filed or depositions that you have to attend, it never really gives the family the opportunity to grieve.
As an attorney, and let's get to the other case, but I want to talk about the preponderance of civil rights attorneys, and the settlements and what you guys get. But before we do that, the case of Maurice Gordon, we won't know whether this police officer will be held accountable because he has not been indicted yet, right?
They have not presented the case to the grand jury. Grand juries were, as you can imagine, shut down for a period of time because of COVID. And in the state of New Jersey, they have a law that requires any police-involved shooting, especially those that involve with death, to be presented to the grand jury. So it's not an option, which in some regards is good because too many other cases that we hear about, the officers never get charged because the prosecutors just say, oh, there's not enough evidence. In New Jersey, they don't have that choice. It has to go. And the Attorney General's office has to present it to the grand jury.
When do we expect that?
They are not giving a firm date. They are claiming that there were other cases that happened in 19 and 20 before his that have to be presented, which I think is BS. I guarantee you that if it was the governor of New Jersey's child that was killed, that would have been the first case, the first day that they reopened grand jury. I think because the case was in the New York Times and on CNN, and there was a lot of media coverage when it first happened, they're trying to allow the passage of time to allow memories to fade. And that's why they're delaying it, because they don't want to deal with the outcry on either side. If they get an indictment, they know that they're going to have to deal with the police union. If they don't get an indictment, they're going to have to deal with the public, because here we go, another police officer, another white police officer killing an unarmed Black man with no real consequence. So I think they're trying to kick the can down the road as long as they can.
Maurice Gordon, 28, killed on the morning of May 23rd, Black man by a white New Jersey trooper, New Jersey Parkway, Garden State Parkway and Bass River in that area. And then tell us about the other case that you're working on, or you're a special prosecutor, or you've been called in.
Right, it's more of, I will call it an assignment more than an individual case.
All right, because you're tackling the whole system.
So the mayor of Mount Vernon, who was the first female mayor elected in the city of Mount Vernon history, is a Black woman. She's a strong Black woman, and somebody that came in taking the position that she was not going to allow for any misconduct in her police force. And typically,
so pause for a second for people to digest what you're saying. The mayor has control over the police.
Correct.
So elections matter, right?
Elections absolutely matter.
And this woman, and let's say her name, Shawin Patterson Howard, the first woman.
Mayor Shawin Patterson Howard. Yep.
Shawin, I'm sorry, I said Shawin.
Okay.
Shawin Patterson Howard said, "I won't have any corruption on my watch.
Correct.
I want none of it." So talk about it.
So rather than they have the traditional way that this is handled, you'll go and hire a labor law firm, and these labor lawyers often have relationship with the police officers' lawyers, and they go through the motions, but they don't go aggressively to figure out what happened. And many officers get a slap on the wrist. And that usually is condoned by the elected officials because they are kowtowing to the strength of police unions. So instead of doing that, Mayor Patterson Howard said, I'm going to bring in a civil rights attorney. So on the front line, you're going to have credibility with the community because the city of Mount Vernon is predominantly Black, that I'm bringing in a civil rights attorney to prosecute these disciplinary hearings. I'm not bringing in somebody who may potentially be one of their buddies and somebody that's going to take it easy on them, someone that is used to aggressively going after police. And that's when I got the appointment. And the role is to investigate and prosecute disciplinary charges against officers. So I write up the charges if I determine from the evidence that they have violated the law or violated the disciplinary guide that the department has, file charges against them, and they have a hearing.
How does that feel? We're talking with William Wagstaff III. I love your name. You can follow him at William Esquire 9. What's the 9? What's the 9 for, William?
9 is my birthday.
Okay. 9 is the month?
9 is the day. I just had my 40th, November 9th.
Okay. Happy belated.
Thank you.
To be in a position to wield this much power, what does that mean for you?
Being born and raised in the city of Mount Vernon, I often sit back and reflect and say, wow, the little egghead from Sheridan Avenue now is in a position, one, where the mayor trusts you enough to appoint you to do this. And two, you have the ability not to sit back and complain, not sit back and say, I wish things were different, but to utilize your gifts and abilities to try to make changes so that the community that you were born and raised in will have at least 1 or 2 less bad cops to contend with in their day-to-day travels. So it's humbling. And sometimes I'm asking myself, well, how did this happen? And I really just think grateful is the way that I can describe the feeling, is I'm grateful.
But as you know, we're in a very not strange. This is probably normal American period. One of those waves, of awakening. We'll probably go back to sleep. There'll probably be another crack type epidemic. To follow what we're in right now. Because that's how that goes, right? It'll be something else that'll follow this, or it'll be civil war. The cold civil war that we're in will come to a head. Criminal justice reform should be at the forefront of anybody who is running a city right now, and what policing looks like, and reimagining police in this country, because usually they come to take reports after a crime has been committed, right? And in the commission of a crime, very often, people may be apprehended, like if it's a robbery or something, but more often than not, particularly in our community, things like what happened to Mr. Gordon happens, or Amadou Diallo, or Sean Bell, like we go down a list, or George Floyd, right? Eric Garner, Mike Brown. It's like these things are more likely to happen. What happened to Tamir Rice, right? Or Elijah McClain. Like not every nail needs a hammer. Not everything we need a hammer for. Reimagining what police looks like, I think, should be one of the forefront issues of what we do as a nation. But it's not, right? And when we talk about police reform, we get so much pushback, as if the way policing is done right now is fair, equitable, or even that it makes sense, because it really doesn't. How do we get there?
We're contending with the unfortunate reality of human nature. So you have a structure in place where whoever turns out the most votes in an election and whoever has the most reliable base is going to likely win the election. The police unions are very strong. They realize the power that they have and they use that power. So while there may be mayors, village supervisors, town supervisors that may have some intentions when they step into the position to do the right thing, they're going to have their campaign manager or their political consultants that are going to tell them the harsh realities that, you want to get reelected, you can't do that. So then they're confronted with, one, if they start to buy into the taste of power and not wanting to get away from it, then they're conflicted. If they deal with the reality that if 4 years, you can't do much. You generally need at least 2 terms to do something. I'm not getting a second term if I crack the whip. So they needed something like George Floyd and the racial awakening that we have right now to even comfortably be able to touch these topics. But what we need, and I don't know, I just had this conversation with a childhood friend who's into politics on Friday. Who or what is going to be the catalyst for sustainable civic engagement? It can't be for we got to get Trump out of office. It can't be we're upset because Black lives should matter. It can't be a period or a moment. It has to be sustainable. And I understand that's difficult because many of us that we need to be at the polls, they have 3 jobs or they're trying to worry about sustaining themselves. So asking them to be at the local city council meeting to learn what they're passing legislation about is not realistic. They have children they need to focus on, how they're going to get them to school. So I don't know what that looks like, but to me, the answer, and whoever or who among us can collectively figure out how to get sustainable civic engagement will be the person that allows us to kind of break out of this. If we collectively ever realized how much power we had, things would start to shift, but we just are walking through life trying to survive. We don't have the time for the awakening of how powerful we are if we are aligned.
Well, that's on purpose. William O. Wagstaff III is here. Technology, as you're talking, every single school board, city council, alderman, every meeting should be available online, should be streamed. Everybody should have access to it when they have time. And I imagine some of those moments can go viral if people share them enough throughout their community. We should have access, right? This pandemic has given us access in a way we've never had before. No excuse. Everything should be zoomed and streamed. But on the fight front, I feel like there's, not just fatigue around like, oh, we vote and we don't get anything for our vote, but also this kind of, we march after the fact. The marching hasn't really been effective. It's not like the Selma Pettus Bridge. It's not like the March on Washington, which was actually a celebration of a culmination of a bunch of civil rights landmark legislation that happened. And then those speeches were incredible. Now I feel like we have an era of ambulance chasing among civil rights leaders and people who are even in your field of criminal justice reform and lawyers. It's all about the settlements. It's all about, the cameras. It's all about, and to your point, if Maurice Gordon was around the clock the way George Floyd was, where people were saying his name like they were saying Breonna Taylor's name, perhaps the grand jury would already be. What is the name of the officer who killed him? We don't even know that. You had to scroll and look around. What's his name?
Randall Wetzel.
Thank you. Randall Wetzel. Like, we would know his name like we know Derek Chauvin. But we don't. Right? Because you haven't gotten that level of attention. Do you, as you sit and watch that, do you feel a way? Because I feel some ways about it, but I also understand the importance of the media. How do you navigate that? How do you balance?
I think that the media attention is a necessary evil. I think that no different than the politicians that I just mentioned, you have people that are human. Civil rights attorneys are not excluded from that human flaw, that once you get in front of those cameras and you have everybody saying you're so special and you're so great and we need you and thank you, there's a lot of people that they get high off of it. And it becomes more about when's the next press conference than about doing work that's going to actually change laws and getting victories in the courthouse. They're also many times underfunded. It may look good when they stand there with their suit on, and it sounds good during those press conferences, but when you're battling against the state of New Jersey, or you're battling against these municipalities that have hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars at their disposal, so they can hire the top law firms and put 20 associates on the case that bombard you with motions, those settlements become more attractive. And they start telling their clients, this is an uphill battle, and they're not necessarily looking to fight. So those are just some of the realities of it. So yes, are there times when I look at the TV and I roll my eyes a bit? Yes, but not because I'm envious, because I understand or believe that there were other things that could have been done, and that this could have been a landmark case if taken all the way to the end, whether it's at the appellate division or the Supreme Court. And then the families, sometimes the attorneys or them collectively, went for the low-hanging fruit, which
Right.
until you live it. Go ahead. I'm sorry, sister.
No, I'm just, fortunately, I've been reading a lot, and I think about the Spotswood Robinsons, the Pauli Murrays, the Thurgood Marshalls, who devoted their lives to the legal fight, right? And we had the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. They were strategic about the cases that they teed up. God bless you. They understood the history of it all. And yes, we all have to eat, but there were sacrifices made. A lot of them didn't have a lot of money, but they knew that this was more important because they weren't doing what they were doing for a time, for just that. They were doing it for forever, for the rest of us, for history's sake, to make sure we're all good down the line. I don't know if the commitment's there anymore. So,
I don't think the commitment is there, but I think one of the most ingenious things that, and we'll say, the government or mainstream society did after the civil rights movement, they recognized that if we treat Martin, Malcolm, and the quote unquote talented 10 the same as we do the least of them, then they are going to join together because their life experiences are no different. If we allow the Malcolms, the Martins, and the special, more educated ones to become CEOs, let them get a suburban lifestyle, give them a Benz, let a few of them golf with us, even though we're still going to treat them poorly, then they'll be separated from and start to view themselves more like us and not like the rest of them, and leave the remainder of them to kind of figure it out. And then you had the crack epidemic. And I think the confluence of those things together perfectly separated, where if I could be the CEO, my kids could go to private school, I could be general counsel at Forbes or one of these companies. Do I really want to be marching and fighting and doing all of this for $40,000 a year when I could make $400,000 a year? Again, there goes that human nature. It becomes very difficult to resist, and only the strongest of the strong will resist that and say, I'm in for the long haul.